tunnel in my life. Hold tight, some beauties appearing bright in my sight.
Hello Somerville, my name is Ed Halloran and welcome to the Somerville Labor Show. Every week it's something new, and this is no different than last week and the week before that. We have discussed wage theft on this show before. Marcy Goldstein-Gelb. She did a wonderful job presenting that with us. And this particular episode here is no different. What I want you to do is just take a quick look at this sign right here. Welcome to the city of Somerville, 1972, All-America City. Really, I think that was the very first All-America, and we've come a long way since then, and we continue. It's a great city, as you know. Also, here we are in beautiful Union Square. You can't beat it, man, you know, and all of its construction. It's just a great place to be. So I want to open by saying in 2009, the then Board of Aldermen, now City Council, supported by the mayor, passed an ordinance on wage theft and workers' rights. This show's topic that we are discussing in this episode is employer wage theft. This is a troubling subject that continues to occur all around us more frequently than many of us know. And I can tell you that this happened to me. It's happened to plenty of people out there. It's happening to people right now, they don't even know it. So you are being robbed of your wages. It does happen. So my guest here is Pennie Taylor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ed.
Good to have you. And you, I know you're everywhere. And so I want to just give us a little background, who you are and what you've been doing in the city as an activist, because I know you do quite a bit. And let our viewers know exactly what you've been doing, what you've been working on.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and
no problem.
about this important issue.
My pleasure.
So I have lived in Somerville since, 2009, and been an artist working in the art community, and lately a community organizer. I'm on the board of the Union Square Neighborhood Council, and have been helping get the word out about development in Union Square for the past several years through that platform.
And you were on the show.
Yes, I was on the show.
You were on the show.
Sweating it out.
Yeah,
to
you
get the word
sweated. I
out
tell you,
about
man,
the
there was an hour-long show, 2 episodes.
Yeah.
We love that, though. And we actually have a deal now. We've got something that's going to be happening down in Union Square with US2.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And the neighborhood, and they're very excited about that. I'm happy about it myself.
So yeah, working on community-led development and thinking about how we can democratize people participating in the development that's happening and capture some of that value for us.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What drives you on things like that? People might want to say, these people, what's in it for them? Why do they want to be community activists? Why do they volunteer for all these groups? Why do they go to our revolution? Somerville stands together. Why do you do that?
Well,
Do you know why?
do I know why?
I think it's wonderful. I love it. I ask myself that question, but I just want to know, do you think that it's something that is definitely worthwhile? You're helping your community.
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is fueled by a little bit of frustration. So walking out my door, seeing the development happening right outside the door, seeing my friends be displaced and moving out of town, seeing a lot of people who are in a tougher financial position, being forced out more quickly, and really trying to make sure that development actually benefits everybody in the community and doesn't just displace the people that have made this community what it is.
So you did with a lot of, this is what many leaders do. I've seen this to be true. You have to coexist. And in order for you to coexist, sometimes you have to take over a little piece of that in your life.
Yeah.
And that's what many of us do. That's what many leaders have done over the years. And I really commend you for that. I want to thank you for doing that. One of the things I want to mention here, I want to go back to 2013. I'm going to roll the clock back a little because this is how long, this ordinance has been on the book. We're talking about a wage theft ordinance that is now being reworked by a committee.
Yep.
That's been put together. Can you tell us a little bit about the committee?
Sure. So, a group, so the idea kind of happened from several places at the same time. So you have this ordinance in the books that's never been enforced and has a loophole that makes it, frankly, rather unenforceable. So our Revolution, Somerville Labor Working Group, of which I'm a member, and Somerville Stands Together are two organizations that really brought attention to the fact that we have a wage theft ordinance and it's pretty weak. What's happening with it? We know wage theft is still happening in the city, so we got to do something. I also have done work with the Carpenters Union, and this is a campaign that they have been doing across the state of bringing stronger wage theft ordinances to municipalities and linking it to powers that cities have to stop bad actors from being in our communities, exploiting workers in our towns. So,
And not everybody has a union, so we're going to get into that. We'll talk
Yeah.
about people who are really being preyed upon
Yeah.
with this wage theft.
Yeah.
So let me just give you a little background on this here. It's basically was a toothless ordinance. No teeth, no bite, right?
well, there is the loophole that I always point to is that one of the requirements of what kicks it into play is a criminal judgment in a wage theft case. And if you look on the Attorney General's website, which posts wage theft rulings, you never see the word criminal in the column of judgments. Many of these are settled out of court, or other agreements are reached, and we wanted to make sure that these actors who had a track record of wage theft violations were not just being welcomed in with open arms without checks or assertions to make sure they wouldn't do it again in our community.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense, and that's exactly what I think. That's why I think you guys are doing. You're definitely down the right path on that one. So, the proposed ordinance. Now, this is going back in 2013. All right, so you guys have done a lot of work since then. Would include language in the city's code of ordinances granting city boards and commissions, where allowed by state law, the authority to deny applications for licenses or permits for businesses found liable or guilty, or who admit liability or guilt related to a violation of the Massachusetts general laws pertaining to payment of wages. The ordinance would also grant authority to revoke existing licenses or permits or issues penalties as necessary. So this is really important. And
Yeah.
somebody has to kind of get a hold on that. So can you let me just ask this question. It's a very broad question, and you can answer it any way you want. It's fine. There's no right or wrong answer. You know that, and you've been down this road. Define exactly what qualifies for wage theft, because there's so much of it out there. Just give us a couple.
Sure. Well, this isn't like the state legal definition of what wage theft is,
No,
but
it's
several
fine.
examples.
That's what you say.
Sure. Several examples that are prevalent are, so if you're asked to clock out and then forced to keep working, if you aren't paid at all, you're paid less than you expect, you're paid in cash. There are like line items on paychecks that remove $5 from every paycheck and are attributed to things like laundry fees. Like that's illegal, but someone might not pick up on it looking at their paycheck, like that, to know that that is their right to get that money back. So a lot of it is about knowing workers' workers knowing their rights, so they know that when that happens, that shouldn't be happening. And then part of it is the support for when they recognize something, to have a support network to help see them through the process.
So it's more prevalent in the food industry business, like the restaurants and things like that?
So we've had some prevalent local cases in Somerville in the restaurant industry, an industry where wage theft is rampant and other states have done it, is like nail salons. So there was a big case of people not getting paid for working at nail salons, and that connects to worker health and safety as well, which I think you said you wanted to talk about a bit later. And one industry where wage theft is really prevalent is the construction industry. And I learned a lot about this through working with the carpenters. And I mean, you take a walk down any street and you see several construction projects in Somerville, and you kind of start learning once you read up on this, like which, what makes a good workplace for someone in the construction industry.
Right.
And it means, getting all your wages, first of all. So, I mean, we've heard horror stories of people like not getting paid at all, of people, getting injured on the job and not having any
And that's one of the
follow-up or-
reasons why unions become unions and why they get involved, because of laws. Because in the next topic I want to ask you a question about is OSHA safety laws, and workers' rights include safety. So I know that there were trainings on this, there was discussion on this.
Yeah.
What is some of the things that we've learned in the OSHA standards, some of the things that are going on, and what the concerns are about safety on the job?
Yeah, absolutely.
Workers' rights.
Yeah, so I mean, it is proper training, proper equipment, so that you're not exposed to chemicals, you're not exposed to dangerous situations without protective gear.
Right.
You are not working a number of hours that would be considered unsafe. And I mean, there are laws on several layers of
Right, exactly.
legal spectrum to cover this.
I tell you, you'd be amazed, even in some of the best places, some of the best workplaces, there's still violations there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is. It's amazing. I mean, people out there plowing snow and doing things that people take for granted, and nobody knows how long that some of these people have been working and really racking their brain. It's a very difficult job. I want to have we all know Ram Wilson, so obviously needs no introduction there. He is a community leader, and I can tell you that he's always out there working hard. So let me give you a little quote from Rand. What he did say is that we believe the problem of wage theft in Somerville is much bigger than most people would assume. Our objective is to make Somerville a fairer place to work and do business. So my question is, do you believe that wage theft is more widespread than people would assume?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, part of that is an education campaign of like, what actually is wage theft? Like, how do you recognize it
Yes.
when it's happening right in front of your face to you or your coworkers? Another piece of that is in who is monitoring wage theft. So the Attorney General's Office of the state has a Fair Labor Division. They do a lot of, well, they do. If you look at the actual numbers, like they do work site visits, they follow up with complaints. You can check, there's a public database with all this information that they catalog, which is a really important resource that'll come up a bit later.
I think people get really confused too. I think if someone is, maybe their English isn't the best,
Yeah.
They're a worker that, just really desperately seeking somebody to help them. We're finding out, it's great. The Attorney General's office, the Attorney General, Maura Healey, I think she does great work, works really hard.
Yeah.
But I think on a local level, I think what it seems like your organization is trying to do right now is to try and reel that in locally and really make something happen here and be a watchdog.
Well, absolutely, because as much work as the Attorney General's office does, they're pretty limited. If you look at their Labor Day reports, they make about as many site visits as there are days in the year. And when you know how many construction projects are happening and how prevalent wage theft is even in that one industry.
Especially here in Somerville, because it's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Everywhere you go,
well,
it's
the entire region. So, that's a lot of sites to visit. So I know, for instance, the Carpenters Union and other building trades do site visits, do casually talk to workers, and then often help them follow up and or do, standouts or call out the employers and
Absolutely.
many different tactics to try to get.
Safety is incredibly important. So I guess the next question obviously is that do you find that workers sometimes don't know when they're victims of wage theft? And you see that all the time.
Yeah.
And it does happen. And I can tell you honestly, like I said before, I have been a victim. Many of us have, and we just don't know what's going to happen. What type of work would you think typically affect wage theft more prevalent than anything else that you've seen so far?
Well, I guess my focus has largely been on the construction field, but
Okay.
I think in terms of vulnerability, I think you mentioned workers for whom their English may not be that strong, or they might be in perilous immigration statuses or otherwise that makes them not want to call out their employer. We saw
Intimidation.
Yeah, intimidation,
Harassment.
loss of job. If that's your livelihood,
Yeah.
even if you're only getting paid half of what you should be,
Right, you're getting something.
you're in a tough position.
And they worry about that.
Yeah, and so that's one of the prongs of this project, and something that Marcy has really been spearheading is thinking about what support do workers need in Somerville. We have several organizations that have been here working as de facto worker center support for a while, but thinking through what we can actually do to get a worker center in Somerville to then spread that information,
Yeah,
spread
I
that
love
knowledge.
that
and
idea. I'm
support.
fully supportive of that. I know that Rand and a lot of other people have been discussing this for at least 3 or 4 years now,
Yeah.
and they really want that. I support it, and I know that the entire city should support something like that because people need somewhere to turn on a local level, especially right here in the city. So that leads me into something else about the violations of labor rights, and I have a quote here because I have a lot of quotes, but violations of labor rights are a systemic problem affecting all workers, said Patricia Montez, director of Centro Presente, a Somerville-based immigrant rights group that has been assisting many victims of wage theft. Immigrant workers are even more vulnerable to this exploitation. The enormous movement of immigrants to the U.S. is the result of a global economic system that exploits the rights of workers in their own countries. So I guess my question is it true that most of these wage theft ordinances occur to workers that have no union protection? Do you think that's true, or do you find it to be 50-50, or what do you think?
That's a great question. I haven't really thought of it in those terms before. I think part of the reason for making an expansive and industry-inclusive wage theft ordinance is to capture people who may have representation or may not, may have support or may not.
Yeah, to me it sounds about right. It sounds like if you don't have a union, you don't have a really great employer, then they are definitely going to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
And they're going to do whatever they want to do, and they're going to tell you what you need to do. I know they're the employer, I get the whole thing,
Yeah.
okay? I've been with unions my entire life, but I have been a little bit outside that, and I can see where people will take advantage of that. But I do think that the wage theft ordinance that's being proposed right now, from what I've seen, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on, it looks like it's something that's going to be that's going to really help a lot of people in the city. So I also went online and I found the Somerville Wage Theft Municipal Code. It's I don't want to bore anybody. Section 9-31. All right, but I did find it, and it said the city, by and though its officials, boards, and commissions may deny an application for any license or permit issued by it during the 3-year period prior to the date of the application, the applicant admitted guilt or liability or has been found guilty, liable, or responsible in any judicial administrative proceeding of committing or attempting to commit a violation. So that's part of it. There's a whole bunch of it. I'm not going to get into that. So how did this subject come up with all the local community activists? Did it just sprout up all of a sudden, or was it something that you guys it just came, or are you getting complaints, or?
Sure. So, I mean, one piece I think is that there have been several kind of high-profile cases in Somerville of restaurants, and so some organizers, especially labor organizers in the area, were galvanized around those instances to kind of look more closely at our municipality. I also think, you know, I have to credit the Carpenters for really pushing this issue and saying, you know, how do we codify protections for workers on all the construction sites happening across the city? I personally would like a lot of them to be union jobs because there are baked-in protections like that come from.
I'm glad you said that. I apologize for stopping you short on that, but the reason why I do that is because everybody thinks that the unions are just out to, you know, we'll get members, we get stronger, we get more money, and it's just all about the money, and that's it. And it's really not what it's about. It's about protection, protecting people, keeping them safe, keeping them from, you know, getting killed on the job, because this does happen, you know, and that's why we're here. We're a watchdog as well.
Yeah.
So I want people, I mean, I want to emphasize that, you know, we are all about the unions, but we still want to see prevailing wage and people being paid properly, and that's really what we're all about.
And I think that's one of the things that the updated, so just a meta step back, that the draft we're working on is still in the License and Permits Committee of the City Council. It's still open, so not every detail is fully hammered down. The conversation is ongoing. But one of the things I like is that some of the provisions in the ordinance are kind of taken from union ideologies. So things like posting hours and having records and things that are common in a union. Oh no. Common in a union shop.
So as you can see, this is raw, okay? It happens, and not a problem. We've had those signs fall off before, but we continue on.
All right. So, you know, some of the tools that unions use to make sure their contractors are being good actors are ideas that we've taken and put in this ordinance. But I also think, you know, with widespread construction, getting something on the books that protects every construction worker on every site, whether it's a union job or not, is incredibly important. We saw in Assembly Square, there were some unsafe practices. I believe someone passed away.
Yes.
And there's also,
years ago. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
So Somerville stands together. Our revolution, Union United. A lot of these groups have worked tirelessly on so many different things. So we're going to discuss some of the highlights of this WTO, which is this wage theft ordinance. And you've been working on this with, I know you're not an expert, I know you're doing the best you can with it, but it is really something that I think is going to really open up some eyes. So the WTO, the wage theft, they have a wage theft advisory committee with community involvement. Can you tell me exactly what that is made up of?
Sure, absolutely. So one thing, in other municipalities that have passed updated wage theft ordinances, one thing that they are really concerned about is enforcement. So what's the point of having something on the books if you're not using it? Some would argue having it as a threat to make people behave is one angle, but we need teeth. So one thing Lynn did that we have modeled in our own ordinance is to have a wage theft advisory committee. And basically it's a volunteer group that is a helping hand. So the Attorney General's office posts information about wage theft violations on their website. How does that information get in the hands of the License and Permit Committee or the license office in the city of Somerville?
Right.
I mean, they could go look it up, but one of the things we've been trying to do, and this has involved recently extensive conversations with city staff, is figure out how to integrate it as smoothly as possible to not put extra work on the city staff to enforce this, to integrate it into processes of, lists of documents they're already asking for. But what this committee will really do is follow up with every applicant, do the research, look them up on the Attorney General's office, a little bit of back and forth, share that information, do reports following up on what has happened.
So it sounds like it might be more work for city employees, which is not a bad thing.
Right now,
work is good, right?
Right now, kind of it's checking out that it's basically one more box or one more set of documentation.
Well, it sounds like inspectional service is going to need to be involved as well on some of these things.
We're working out the details on that still, and that's one of the pieces that we're really trying to make sure, that the city. One idea is that taking all the rights that the city has, so not doing anything that would require kind of state approval, the tools we already have, and putting them in place to protect workers in the city.
What about the 5 municipal powers? Do we know what any of that is?
Sure. So as I just mentioned, there are certain things that the city has control over. So one is issuing licenses, and so if there's liquor license, restaurant licenses, many types of licenses have to go through the city.
Okay.
We're talking to.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So then municipal contracts. So money the city is actually spending. So the city is employers the city is contracting with, some of that grammar seems off, to make sure that we're not asking people to do work that have a history of wage theft violations.
Basically some oversight there as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I got it.
Another area, and these next two are introduced by the carpenter, so they're not details that are in the current ordinance, but with the TIF at least, some that have been implemented in other municipalities. So connecting this process of documentation and proving you haven't been a violator, if you're asking for a TIF, which is like tax increment financing. So certain types of incentives for employers, we're making sure the employers that are applying and getting those incentives are good actors and have, if they do have a history of violations, that there are, we have some checks and balances.
The other thing too is that I think there's enforcement mechanism, accountability reporting, requirements, posting requirements, and wage bonds.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that really are going to keep the employer on their toes.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
And I think the wage bond is really critical because at the end of the day, if someone experiences and reports wage theft, and there's still arbitration going on between the worker and the employer, we want to make sure workers get paid for their work.
Absolutely.
And so having that fund kind of assures that, and also is a real incentive to not.
So basically now, I think, do you believe that if this is passed, that it would have the teeth needed, because before it lacked enforcement, and this would have more accountability?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
So this would ensure a watchdog organization, right? So we will have a watchdog organization.
With workers on, and we want to have representation of the people who really care about this issue. So we'll have, a wide range of
A volunteer group, is it?
It's a volunteer group, so people from worker centers, people who are involved on the legal side, people who are workers themselves, and then representatives of the city and business community too, just to make sure everything's going smoothly, to incentivize good actors.
So let me give you I want to give a little update here, because we're running short on time, because we have a video that we want to show at the very end of this. It's very important as well, with Jane Reagan from the neighborhood news. June 2017, the local Somerville tavern was fined for wage theft. So here's what a worker said. Worker said that he endured long, unpaid shifts, paying for spilled beers and abandoned bills, and stressful environment for almost 2 years before realizing the treatment of workers was a problem. The Attorney General's office found the company failed to pay the proper rate, and the employees in 2016 directly violating minimum wage laws. In a press release, labor rights organizer Rand Wilson said, "Good Jobs in Somerville said mistreatment of employees is happening across the restaurant industry. It's not just in Somerville. Wage theft has been a major problem in the Boston restaurants for a long time." He said in his statement, what happened at this particular restaurant happens every day in America, and the problem is that employees are afraid to come forward. And we find out that that is true. Workers are cheated out of pay in a number of ways. Sometimes employers, particularly in the restaurant and construction industries, will hire someone for a week and then fire them on a Friday without providing them with the paychecks. Sometimes employers issue checks without sufficient funds to honor them. So oftentimes workers don't know what minimum wage overtime, they don't pay it. So what I want to do is I want to end the show. I want to thank you for being a guest on the show.
My pleasure.
And we don't have a lot of time to squeeze that in. Unfortunately, we do the best we can what we have, but you're a great guest. And every good guest gets a T-shirt, because you know me, and I do with my T-shirts. I'm a little out there with the T-shirt thing. So
Oh, it's a new one. I love it.
yeah, it's when we fight, we win.
And it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and this is the march from 2018. We're at the City Hall. There's a banner going up the hill.
Oh, yeah.
You'll cherish this, right?
I sure will. Yes,
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I want to thank all of you. Please, we've got about a 3 or 4 minute video at the end. We'd like you to watch it. Like I said, Jane Reagan, who was this is a briefing that came through the Somerville News, and it's really excellent. And we are hoping that there'll be funding to enforce this new citywide legislation, and we look forward to it. Okay. And unity is strength. Peace. Thank you.
Across the country.
At the end of the tunnel in my life, hold tight. Some beauties appeared and brightened my side.
If they're that they would then have to take.
You showed up here on any Friday afternoon around 5:30, anytime from July 2012 through the next June or July, it went almost a year. Every Friday there was a crowd of people, and I was one of them. Sometimes my kids were with me, saying, "Donate a diva."